They say the line between a king and a corpse is just one bad decision. For Dante Moretti, the most feared man in Chicago, that decision was trusting the wrong brother. Bleeding out in a freezing alleyway with a price on his head, he wasn't the Don anymore. He was just prey. He had 5 minutes to live before his rivals finished the job. He didn't expect a savior. And he certainly didn't expect her. She was just a waitress in a rusted Honda Civic, counting pennies for rent. But when Sarah Jenkins opened her car door that night, she didn't just save a life. She started a war. This is the story of how a waitress hid a monster, fell for a king, and took down an empire. The rain in Chicago didn't wash away the sins of the city. It just made the blood on the pavement slicker. Dante Moretti stumbled, his hand pressed hard against his side. The pristine white fabric of his custom-tailored dress shirt was ruined, soaked in a deep, alarming crimson. He coughed, the metallic taste of adrenaline and copper filling his mouth. He checked his watch, a platinum Rolex Daytona. It was 2:14 a.m. 10 minutes ago, he had been sitting in the VIP booth of the Velvet Room on Rush Street, finalizing a territory agreement with the Vanchetti family. It was supposed to be a peace treaty. Instead, it was an execution. He remembered the sound of the first glass shattering, then the popping of silenced pistols. His bodyguard, Marcus, had taken the first 2 bullets meant for Dante's chest. "Traitorous dogs!" Dante hissed through gritted teeth, pushing himself off a brick wall in a dark alleyway, behind a row of closed shops. He could hear them. The heavy thud of combat boots splashing through puddles. The screech of tires, black SUVs circling the block like sharks sensing blood in the water. Luca Vanchetti hadn't just come to kill him. He had come to erase him. Dante was the head of the Moretti crime syndicate. He controlled the docks, the unions, and half the politicians in Illinois. But right now, he was a man with a bullet lodged near his floating rib and a jammed Beretta in his pocket. He needed to get off the street. He couldn't go to his penthouse. They would be waiting. He couldn't go to the hospital. Luca had people at St. Luke's. He staggered toward the faint yellow glow of a street lamp at the end of the alley. His vision blurred. The pain was a hot iron rod skewering his torso. He needed a car. He needed a ghost. He reached the end of the alleyway, which dumped him out behind a 24-hour greasy spoon called Jerry's Diner. The smell of stale frying oil and burnt coffee hung heavy in the wet air. Dante leaned against a dumpster, his breathing ragged. He saw a vehicle. It wasn't the armored Cadillac Escalade he was used to. It was a 2009 Honda Civic, silver paint peeling on the hood, with a bumper held on by what looked like duct tape. Ideally, he would have hot-wired a faster car, but he was losing too much blood. His hands were shaking too badly to strip wires. He heard a voice, a shout, echo from the main street. "Check the alley. He couldn't have gone far." Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through his haze. They were here. Just then, the back door of the diner swung open with a harsh creak. A figure stepped out, carrying a heavy black trash bag. A woman. She looked exhausted, her uniform stained with ketchup and grease. She tossed the bag into the dumpster, not 3 feet from where Dante was crouching in the shadows. She sighed, a long, weary sound that spoke of a life harder than the concrete beneath her feet. She pulled a set of keys from her apron pocket and walked toward the beat-up Honda. Dante knew this was it, his only chance. He lunged forward, not with the grace of a predator, but with the desperation of a dying animal. He stumbled into the light. "Help!" he rasped, the word barely audible over the rain. The woman spun around, a can of pepper spray instantly appearing in her hand. She didn't scream. That surprised him. Most civilians screamed. "Stay back!" she warned. Her voice was steady, though her eyes were wide. She took in his appearance, the expensive suit ruined by blood, the pale skin, the sheer danger radiating off him. "I have 0 cash, buddy. You're robbing the wrong waitress." "Not a robbery," Dante groaned, clutching his side as his knees gave way. He slid down the side of the dumpster, leaving a streak of red on the metal. "I need a ride. I'll pay you. 10,000. Cash." The woman, Sarah, blinked. The rain plastered a strand of dark hair across her face. "You're bleeding out." "Please," Dante whispered. The sound of running footsteps grew louder from the alley entrance. "They're coming." Sarah looked at him, then toward the dark mouth of the alley. She saw the beams of flashlights cutting through the rain. She saw the silhouettes of men holding weapons that were definitely not for self-defense. She looked back at Dante. He was handsome, in a terrifying way, but right now he looked like a broken child. Sarah Jenkins had made a lot of bad decisions in her 24 years. She had dropped out of college to pay for her mum's chemo. She had taken loans from loan sharks she couldn't pay back. But looking at the man bleeding on the asphalt, she made the most reckless decision of all. "Get in," she hissed, unlocking the back door of the Honda. "Get down on the floorboard. Now." Sarah Jenkins shoved the man's legs into the cramped space behind the driver's seat. He was heavy, dead weight, and he smelled like expensive cologne mixed with the copper scent of a slaughterhouse. "Stay down and shut up," she whispered, throwing a pile of her dirty laundry, gym clothes she had been meaning to wash for a week, over him. It wasn't a perfect camouflage, but in the dark, through tinted windows that were peeling, it might work. She jumped into the driver's seat, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She jammed the key into the ignition. "Please start. Please, you piece of junk, start." The engine sputtered, whined, and then roared to life with a noisy rattle. Sarah threw the car into reverse, just as 3 men burst out from behind the diner. They were dressed in black tactical gear, looking like a SWAT team, but moving with the chaotic aggression of gangsters. One of them, a man with a scar running through his eyebrow, raised a flashlight and shined it directly at her windshield. Sarah threw her hand up to shield her eyes, feigning annoyance rather than terror. She rolled down her window an inch. "Hey!" the scarred man shouted, approaching the car. He had a gun at his side, barely concealed. "You see a guy come through here, suit, bleeding?" Sarah forced herself to look annoyed. She channeled every ounce of frustration she felt toward her manager, Rick, who had just made her work a double shift for 0 tips. "Look, pal," she snapped, her voice cracking only slightly. "I just worked 14 hours. The only thing I saw was the garbage I just threw out. Now move, or I'm calling the cops. There are cameras back here." It was a lie. The cameras at Jerry's hadn't worked since 1998. But the man hesitated. He glanced at the dumpster, then at the main road. "Check the car," another man shouted from the back. Sarah's grip on the steering wheel tightened until her knuckles turned white. Below her seat, she felt the man, Dante, shift. If he groaned, if he coughed, they were both dead. She knew it. These weren't cops. They wouldn't read her rights. They would just erase the witness. The scarred man stepped closer, shining his light into the back seat. The beam swept over the pile of gym clothes. Sarah held her breath. The light lingered on a grey sweatshirt. Beneath it, Dante lay perfectly still, holding his breath until his lungs burned. "Clear," the man grunted, turning away. "He must have cut through to 5th Avenue. Let's go." They turned and sprinted toward the street. Sarah didn't wait. She slammed her foot on the gas. The Honda lurched forward, tires spinning on the wet asphalt before catching grip. She peeled out of the parking lot, merging onto the empty street, her heart rate spiking so high she felt dizzy. She drove for 10 minutes in silence, taking random turns, weaving through the industrial district toward the highway. Only when she was sure no SUVs were following did she speak. "Hey," she said, looking in the rear-view mirror. "You still alive back there?" There was a pause, then a low groan. The pile of laundry shifted. Dante pushed the clothes aside and pulled himself up to a sitting position. His face was grey, drained of colour, but his eyes, piercing, ice blue, were alert. "Barely," he muttered. "You handled that surprisingly well." "I grew up in a bad neighbourhood," Sarah said tightly. "I know how to lie to men with guns. Where am I taking you? A hospital?" "No," Dante barked, then winced, clutching his side. "No hospitals. They'll find me. Do you have a place? Somewhere quiet?" Sarah laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "My place? Buddy, I live in a studio apartment the size of a shoebox, with walls thin enough to hear my neighbor sneeze. You bleed on my carpet, I lose my security deposit." "I will buy you the building," Dante said, his voice serious. He reached into his blood-soaked jacket and pulled out a money clip. He fumbled with it, his fingers slippery with blood, and tossed a wad of bills onto the passenger seat. Sarah glanced at it. It was a stack of hundreds. Thick, easily $2,000 or $3,000. That was 3 months of rent. That was her mum's medication for the next 6 weeks. She bit her lip. This was insane. This was harboring a fugitive. But the money was real, and the man in her back seat was dying. "If you die in my apartment," Sarah said, her voice trembling, "I am dragging your body to the curb." "Deal," Dante whispered, closing his eyes. Sarah merged onto I-90, heading toward the south side. She kept checking her mirrors. Every set of headlights looked like a threat. "What's your name?" she asked, trying to keep him awake. "Dante," he murmured. "I'm Sarah." "Sarah," he repeated, testing the weight of it. "You drive like a maniac, Sarah." "It's the Chicago way," she retorted. Silence fell over the car again. Sarah turned on the radio to drown out the sound of Dante's ragged breathing. A news report was playing. "Shootout at the Velvet Room in downtown Chicago. Leaves 3 dead. Police are searching for Dante Moretti, alleged head of the Moretti crime family, who fled the scene." Sarah's blood ran cold. She slammed on the brakes, the car skidding slightly. She turned around in her seat, staring at the man. "Moretti?" she whispered. "You're the mob boss? The one on the news?" Dante opened one eye. He looked at her, defenseless, yet carrying an air of absolute authority. "I am," he admitted. "And right now, Sarah, I am the only thing standing between you and the people who want me dead. Because now that you've helped me, they will come for you too." Sarah felt the world tilt on its axis. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was an accomplice. "I should kick you out right now," she said, tears pricking her eyes. "You could," Dante agreed softly. "But you won't. Because you need that money. And I need to survive. We are stuck together, Piccola." Sarah looked at the money on the seat. She looked at the blood staining her upholstery. She gripped the wheel, cursed loudly, and slammed her foot back on the gas. She drove him home. Sarah's apartment was located in a crumbling brick building in Bridgeport. It wasn't glamorous, but it was anonymous. Getting Dante up the 3 flights of stairs was a nightmare. He was heavy, dense with muscle, and fading fast. Sarah had to drape his arm over her shoulder, taking most of his weight. Every step was a struggle. "Quiet," she hissed as they passed Mrs. Gable's door on the 2nd floor. Mrs. Gable was 80 years old and watched the hallway through her peephole like a hawk. They made it inside her apartment. It was small, cluttered with books and bills, but clean. Sarah dumped Dante onto her beige sofa. He groaned, his head lolling back. "Okay," Sarah said, pacing the room. Okay. I have a first aid kit. I have Band-Aids and peroxide. That's not going to cut it, is it? Dante looked down at his side. The bullet had torn through the oblique muscle. It wasn't an organ hit, he didn't think, but it was deep. I need needle, Dante gritted out. Thread. Vodka or whiskey. And a knife. Sarah stared at him. You want me to perform surgery? I'm a waitress, Dante. I serve burgers. You have small hands, Dante said, his eyes losing focus. Steady hands. You can do it. Or I die here. Sarah ran to her kitchenette. She grabbed a bottle of cheap vodka she kept for bad days. She found a sewing kit she used to mend her uniform. She grabbed a steak knife. She returned to the sofa. This is going to hurt. I know, Dante said. He took the bottle of vodka, unscrewed the cap with his teeth, and took 3 long swigs. Then he poured the rest over the wound. He didn't scream, but a guttural growl ripped from his throat. His body arched off the sofa, muscles seizing. Do it, he gasped. For the next hour, Sarah Jenkins worked in a fugue state of horror and focus. She dug the bullet out with the sterilized knife tip. It hadn't gone as deep as she feared. She poured more vodka. She threaded the needle. Her hands, usually shaking from caffeine and stress, were rock steady. She stitched the wound closed, counting the stitches. 1, 2, 10. When she finished, she was covered in sweat and his blood. She taped a gauze pad over the stitches. Dante had passed out from the pain halfway through. Now he lay still on her couch, his chest rising and falling in a rhythmic slumber. Sarah sank to the floor, leaning her back against the armchair. She stared at the man who had turned her life upside down in less than 2 hours. He was terrifyingly beautiful, even in this state. The sharp jawline, the dark stubble, the expensive watch that cost more than her entire life's earnings. She reached for the stack of cash he had thrown on the passenger seat. She counted it. $5,000. It was enough to pay off the loan shark, Vinny, who had been threatening to break her legs if she didn't pay by Friday. It was a miracle, a bloody, dangerous miracle. She stripped off her ruined uniform and threw it in the trash. She showered, scrubbing her skin until it was raw, trying to wash away the feeling of the night. When she came out, wrapped in a robe, Dante was awake. He was watching her. His eyes were clearer now. You saved me, he said, his voice raspy but strong. Don't get used to it, Sarah replied, grabbing a glass of water and handing it to him. As soon as you can walk, you're leaving. Dante took the water, his fingers brushing hers. A spark, electric and undeniable, shot through Sarah's arm. She pulled back quickly. Sarah, Dante said, the men who did this? The Vanchetti brothers? They will check the traffic cameras. They will track your car. We aren't safe here for long. My car? Sarah's eyes widened. My license plate? Exactly. We need to ditch the car. Tonight. That car is my livelihood, Sarah cried. I can't just ditch it. I will buy you 10 cars, Dante said dismissively. But right now, we need to move. Do you have a garage? Somewhere underground? No, Sarah said, panic rising again. It's parked on the street. Dante struggled to sit up. Go check the window. Don't open the curtains. Just peek. Sarah walked to the window. She pulled the blinds back a fraction of an inch. Down on the street, the rain was still pouring, but under the streetlight, 2 blocks away, she saw it. A black SUV. It was creeping slowly down the street, its headlights off. Oh God, Sarah whispered. There's a black truck. Creeping. They found the car, Dante said grimly. He forced himself to stand, swaying dangerously. We have to leave, now. Through the back. Where do we go? Sarah asked. grabbing her purse and a coat. Dante looked at her, a dark intensity in his eyes. To the only place they won't look, the lion's den. The fire escape on the back of Sarah's building was a rusted skeleton of iron that shuddered with every step. The rain had turned the metal rungs into slick traps, threatening to send them plummeting 3 stories down into the trash-strewn alley below. Dante moved slower than Sarah would have liked. Every step cost him. She could hear his breath hitching, a wet, ragged sound that terrified her more than the men out front. He was holding his side, the fresh stitches pulling tight against his skin. "Keep moving," Dante whispered, his voice barely audible over the relentless drumming of the rain. "Don't look down, just move." Sarah scrambled down the last ladder, dropping the final 4 feet onto the wet concrete. She turned and helped steady Dante as he landed heavily. He groaned, his knees buckling, but he forced himself upright. "Through the fence," Sarah directed, pointing to a hole in the chain link that the neighborhood kids used as a shortcut. "It leads to the rail yard." They squeezed through the gap, the jagged metal snagging Dante's ruined suit jacket. Behind them, from the front of the building, came the sound of glass shattering. A heavy thump followed. They were kicking down her door. "They're inside," Sarah choked out, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "They're destroying everything." "They are looking for bodies," Dante corrected grimly. "When they don't find us, they will burn it. We need to be gone before the fire trucks arrive." They moved into the shadows of the rail yard, navigating around rusted shipping containers and decommissioned train cars. The city of Chicago loomed around them, a sleeping giant indifferent to their struggle. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, her teeth chattering from the cold. She was wearing only her thin coat over her pajamas and boots. "The meatpacking district," Dante said. "I own a processing plant. It's been closed for renovations. It has amenities." "That's 5 miles away," Sarah hissed. "You can barely walk 5 feet." "Then we will not walk," Dante said. He stopped by an old beige Ford pickup truck parked near a maintenance shed. It looked like it hadn't moved in years, covered in grime. Dante leaned against the truck, his face pale as moonlight. "Check the wheel well. Driver's side. Rear." Sarah looked at him like he was crazy, but she crouched down and felt inside the muddy wheel well. Her fingers brushed against something cold and magnetic. A key box. She pulled it out and stared at him. "How did you know?" "This is a drop car," Dante explained, sliding into the passenger seat as Sarah unlocked the door. "We keep them scattered around the city for emergencies. I haven't used this one since 18. Pray the battery isn't dead." Sarah climbed into the driver's seat. The truck smelled of old tobacco and dust. She turned the key. The engine wheezed, whined, and then caught with a thunderous roar. "Go!" Dante commanded. "No headlights until we hit the main road." Sarah navigated the truck out of the yard, her heart pounding in her throat. As they pulled onto the street, she looked back toward her apartment building. A plume of black smoke was already curling out of her 3rd-story window, rising into the rainy night sky. Everything she owned, her mother's photos, her uniform, her bed, gone. "I'm sorry," Dante said softly, watching the smoke too. "I will replace it all. Tenfold." "Just keep me alive," Sarah said, gripping the wheel. "That's all I want." The drive to the meatpacking district was a blur of tension. Every police siren made them flinch. Every car that stayed behind them for too long felt like an assassin. But the old truck blended in perfectly with the industrial traffic of the city at night. They arrived at a hulking brick building on the edge of the river. The sign above the door read, "Moretti Meats and Cold Storage." The windows were boarded up. It looked abandoned. Dante directed her to a loading dock around the back. He punched a code into a keypad hidden behind a loose brick. The massive steel shutter door groaned and began to lift slowly. Sarah drove the truck inside. The space was pitch black. "Wait," Dante said. The shutter door closed behind them, plunging them into total darkness. Then, overhead, lights flickered on, one by one, revealing a space that was definitely not just a meat processing plant. The center of the warehouse was cleared out. In the middle sat a sleek, black helicopter. Along the walls were racks of servers blinking with green lights, rows of tactical weapons, and monitors displaying camera feeds from all over the city. "Welcome to the Lion's Den," Dante said, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Home sweet home." Sarah stared, her mouth agape. "Who are you?" "Really?" "I told you," Dante said, opening the door and stepping out, his movement slightly smoother now that the adrenaline was fading into a dull ache. "I'm the guy who runs this city, and right now, someone is trying to take my throne." He walked over to a medical station, set up near the server banks. It looked like a mini ER, fully stocked with IVs, monitors, and surgical tools. "Help me," he said, sitting on the gurney. "I need an IV, antibiotics and fluids. Can you do that?" Sarah nodded slowly. She had spent enough time in hospitals with her mum. She knew how to find a vein. She walked over, her hands trembling slightly as she prepped the IV bag. "You have all this," she said, gesturing to the helicopter and the guns. "Why were you alone in that alley?" Dante's expression darkened. The look in his eyes shifted from pain to a cold, simmering rage. "Because," he said, his voice dropping an octave, "the only people who knew where I was tonight were my brother, Matteo, and my head of security. One of them is dead. The other is a traitor." Sarah inserted the needle. Dante didn't flinch. "My brother," he whispered, staring at the blank monitor on the wall. "My own blood. He sold me to Vanchetti." The warehouse was silent, save for the hum of the server banks and the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor Dante had hooked himself up to. It was 4 a.m. Outside, the city was waking up, but inside the Lion's Den, time felt suspended. Sarah sat on a rolling stool, watching Dante. The IV fluids had brought some color back to his face. He had changed out of his ruined suit into a clean black t-shirt and tactical pants he had pulled from a locker. He looked less like a victim now, and more like a soldier preparing for war. He was typing furiously on a keyboard, his eyes scanning multiple screens. "Matteo," Dante muttered. He wiped the encrypted drives at the penthouse. He's trying to erase the ledger. "The ledger?" Sarah asked. She was eating a protein bar she had found in a supply crate. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the adrenaline crashed. "The list," Dante explained without looking away. "Names of judges, police captains, senators on our payroll. If Matteo gives that list to the Vanchettis, they don't just take my territory. They take my leverage. They become untouchable." He hit a key, and a video feed popped up on the center screen. It was a security camera feed from outside a mansion. Sarah recognized the location. It was the Moretti estate in Lake Forest. On the screen, she saw a man who looked strikingly like Dante, though slightly younger and softer around the edges. He was shaking hands with a man in a long trench coat. "That's Matteo," Dante said, his voice dripping with venom. "And that is Luca Vanchetti." Sarah shivered. "They look like they're celebrating." "They are," Dante said. "They think I'm dead. They think my body is rotting in a dumpster behind Jerry's diner." He turned to look at Sarah. For the first time all night, his gaze wasn't calculating or defensive. It was curious. "Why did you do it?" he asked. Sarah blinked. "Do what?" "Let me in your car. Stitch me up. Drive me here. You could have run away 10 times tonight. You could have called the cops." Sarah looked down at her hands. They were still stained with dried blood under the fingernails. "My mum," she said softly. "She has stage 4 lymphoma. The treatment isn't covered by insurance. It's $6,000 a month just to keep her comfortable." She looked up at him, her eyes fierce. "I owed a loan shark named Vinny the Shark 12 grand. He told me yesterday that if I didn't pay by Friday, he'd pay my mum a visit at the hospice. When you threw that money on the seat, I didn't see a mob boss. I saw a way to save her." Dante stared at her. Silence stretched between them, heavy and thick. "Vinny works for me," Dante said quietly. Sarah's jaw dropped. "What?" "Vinny works for the Moretti family. He's a low-level earner in the South Side crew." Sarah felt a wave of nausea. "So, I saved the boss of the man who threatened to hurt my dying mother." Dante stood up. He walked over to her, ignoring the pull of the IV line. He stopped inches from her, towering over her small frame. "Sarah," he said, his voice solemn. "Consider the debt cleared. Vinny will never touch you or your mother again. In fact, by tomorrow morning, Vinny will be very unavailable." "I don't want you to kill him," Sarah said quickly. "I just want him to leave us alone." "Done," Dante said. "And your mother's medical bills? They are taken care of, indefinitely. You saved my life. The Moretti family pays its debts." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. She wanted to cry, but she was too exhausted. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Dante said, turning back to the screens. "We are not out of the woods. Matteo is moving fast. He's called a meeting of the capos, the captains of the family, for tomorrow night at the Sapphire Club. He plans to announce my death and take control." "So, what do we do?" Sarah asked. "Do you call the police?" Dante laughed, a short, dark sound. "Police? No. In my world, we handle things differently. If I don't walk into that meeting alive, Matteo wins. If I show up, I have to be strong enough to kill the traitor and retake the crown." He winced, his hand going to his side. "But in this condition, I can't fight. I can barely stand." "You need rest," Sarah said, her waitress instincts kicking in. "You need to sleep." "I can't sleep," Dante argued. "I need to contact my loyalists. I need to know who is with me and who is with Matteo. But I can't use the phones. They'll be tapped." He looked at Sarah. An idea seemed to form in his mind. "I need eyes on the street," he said slowly. "I need someone who is invisible. Someone nobody looks at twice." Sarah narrowed her eyes. "You mean a waitress?" "I mean someone brave enough to save a dying man in an alley," Dante corrected. "I need you to go to the Sapphire Club tomorrow. Not inside, just the perimeter. I need you to drop a package for my consigliere, heavy-set guy, grey hair. His name is Frank. If Frank gets the package, he'll know I'm alive. He'll secure the room for me." "And if Frank is working with Matteo?" Sarah asked. "Then," Dante said, his face hardening, "you run, and I die." It was a suicide mission. Sarah knew it. Dante knew it. But then she thought about the burning apartment. She thought about the black SUV creeping down her street. She was already in this war. There was no going back to serving coffee and pancakes. "What's in the package?" Sarah asked. Dante reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy, silver signet ring. It was engraved with a roaring lion. "This," he said, placing the ring in her palm. It was warm from his skin. "This is the ring of the Don. Matteo doesn't have it. As long as I have this, I am the king. And if Frank sees this, he will know that the king is coming home." Sarah closed her fingers around the ring. It felt heavy, burdened with a history of violence and power. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." Dante looked at her, and for a moment the hard exterior of the Mafia Don cracked. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek. "You are a dangerous woman, Sarah Jenkins," he murmured. "If I had met you in another life, I would have never let you go." Sarah's breath caught. The chemistry between them was undeniable, a fire burning in the middle of the wreckage. "Get some sleep, Dante," she whispered, pulling away. "You have a kingdom to win back tomorrow." Dante nodded. He lay back on the gurney, the gun resting on his chest. Within seconds, he was asleep. Sarah didn't sleep. She sat in the chair, clutching the silver ring, watching the sun rise over the gritty industrial skyline of Chicago. She wasn't just Sarah the waitress anymore. She was the keeper of the king's ring. And tomorrow, she was going into the heart of the enemy's territory. The Sapphire Club was not just a nightclub. It was a fortress of velvet and neon located in the heart of the Gold Coast. It was the crown jewel of the Moretti Empire, the place where politicians shook hands with hitmen and where the fate of the city was decided over glasses of 50-year-old scotch. Tonight, the air around the club was electric. Black SUVs lined the curb 3 deep. Men with earpieces and bulging suit jackets patrolled the perimeter. To the average passerby, it looked like a celebrity party. To Sarah Jenkins, watching from the tinted window of a borrowed sedan across the street, it looked like a shark tank. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, her hand gripping the door handle. She was no longer wearing her pajamas. Inside the lion's den, Dante had found a wardrobe left behind by one of his ex-associates. Sarah was now dressed in a sleek, black cocktail dress that hugged her frame, with a pair of heels that cost more than her car. She looked like she belonged in the VIP section, but she felt like an imposter who was about to be eaten alive. Dante sat in the driver's seat. He looked worse than he had an hour ago. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the stark reality of blood loss and fever. His skin was sheen with sweat, his eyes glassy. He checked the magazine of his pistol for the 10th time. "I can't go in yet," Dante rasped. "If I walk in that front door alone, Matteo's men will cut me down before I reach the bar. I need Frank to clear the path. I need him to know I'm alive." He looked at Sarah. "You don't have to go in. You can drop the package at the valet stand. Tell them it's for Frank." "No," Sarah said, surprising herself. "If I leave it at the valet, it might never get to him. Matteo will have people checking everything. I have to put it in his hand." She wasn't doing this for the money anymore. She was doing it because she had seen the man behind the monster. She had seen Dante stitch up his own side to survive. She had seen the rage and the sorrow when he spoke of his brother. She was invested. "Frankie, the Walrus Russo," Dante recited. "He'll be at the main booth, back left. He's heavy, bald, always smoking a cigar even though it's illegal indoors. He's the only man in that room who loved my father like a brother. He's the only one I trust." "Got it," Sarah said. She opened her clutch purse. Inside, wrapped in a cocktail napkin, was the silver signet ring. "Back left booth, bald guy, cigar." She took a deep breath, opened the car door, and stepped out into the cool night air. The walk to the entrance felt like walking the plank. The bouncers were massive, their eyes scanning the crowd for threats. Sarah channeled every ounce of attitude she had learned from dealing with rude customers at the diner. She lifted her chin, fixed a bored expression on her face, and walked straight toward the velvet rope. "Guest list?" the bouncer grunted, stepping in her path. "I'm with Mr. Vanzetti's party," Sarah lied smoothly. "I'm the entertainment he requested for the evening." The bouncer looked her up and down. The dress did its job. He smirked, unhooked the rope, and stepped aside. "Go on in, sweetheart. Don't keep Luca waiting." Sarah stepped inside. The bass of the music hit her chest like a physical blow. The club was dark, lit only by strobes and the blue glow of the bar. It was packed with people dancing, drinking and laughing, oblivious to the war that was about to start in their midst. She navigated through the crowd, her eyes scanning the room. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Don't look nervous. Don't look lost. She saw the VIP section. It was raised on a platform, separated by a glass half-wall. And there they were. Matteo Moretti sat in the center of the booth, looking like a king on a stolen throne. He was laughing, clinking a champagne glass with a man in a white trench coat, Luca Vancetti. The sight made Sarah's stomach turn. They were celebrating Dante's death. And there, sitting at the edge of the booth, looking miserable, was Frank. He was exactly as Dante described, a massive wall of a man with a grey mustache and a sad, bulldog face. He wasn't drinking. He was staring at his hands, an unlit cigar clamped between his teeth. Sarah took a deep breath. She grabbed a tray of drinks from a passing server who was too busy flirting with a patron to notice. "I'll take this to the VIP," she whispered to the startled busboy, moving before he could protest. She walked up the stairs to the VIP section. A guard moved to stop her, but she held the tray high. "Drinks for Mr. Moretti," she announced loudly. Matteo turned, his eyes glazed with alcohol. "Let her through," he waved dismissively. "I'm thirsty." Sarah walked to the table. Her hands were trembling so badly the glasses rattled, but the music masked the sound. She set the drinks down in front of Matteo and Luca. "Compliments of the house," she murmured. She moved to the end of the table, toward Frank. He didn't even look up. "Sir," she said softly. "Napkin?" She held out the cocktail napkin. Frank grunted, reaching for it without looking. His thick fingers brushed hers. "Take it," Sarah hissed, her voice barely a breath. "For Dante." Frank froze. His head snapped up. His eyes, dark and intelligent, locked onto hers. He felt the hard metal of the ring inside the napkin. He didn't gasp. He didn't shout. He was a professional. He simply closed his massive fist around the napkin, crushing it. He looked at Sarah, then subtly opened his hand just enough to see the silver lion. A spark of life returned to the old man's eyes. He looked at Sarah and gave a microscopic nod. Then he stood up. "Where you going, Frank?" Matteo called out, slurping his champagne. "We're about to make the toast." "Bathroom," Frank grumbled, his voice gravelly. "Old man bladder. Start without me." He walked past Sarah. As he passed, he whispered out of the side of his mouth. "Back door. Kitchen. 5 minutes." Sarah turned to leave, her heart soaring. She had done it. "Hey! You!" A hand grabbed her wrist. Sarah froze. She turned to see Luca Vancetti staring at her. His grip was like a vice. His eyes were cold, reptilian. "I haven't seen you here before," Luca said, pulling her closer. "You're a pretty thing. Why are you serving drinks? You should be sitting with us." "I have to get back to the bar," Sarah stammered, trying to pull away. "Nonsense," Luca smiled, showing too many teeth. "Sit, have a drink. Tell me your name." Panic exploded in Sarah's chest. She looked toward the exit. It seemed miles away. Matteo was watching now, his interest piqued. "Let her go, Luca." Matteo laughed. "She's just the help." "She looks familiar." Luca narrowed his eyes. "I saw a girl like her last night, in an alley, behind a diner." Sarah's blood ran cold. He remembered. The flashlight. The windshield. "That wasn't me," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "No?" Luca stood up, still holding her wrist. "Let's take a walk outside. I want to see your car." Sarah was trapped. She looked around for help, but the music pounded on, indifferent. Luca began to drag her toward the side exit. Suddenly, The music cut out. The sudden silence was deafening. The strobe light stopped, replaced by the harsh glare of the house lights, turning on full blast. The crowd groaned in confusion. At the top of the grand staircase, overlooking the entire club, the double doors kicked open with a thunderous bang. Every head in the room turned. Standing there, framed by the light from the hallway, was Dante Moretti. He was pale, sweating, and leaning heavily against the doorframe. But in his hand was a golden Desert Eagle pistol, and in his eyes was pure, unadulterated hellfire. "Get your hands off her, Luca!" Dante's voice boomed through the silent club. The sight of a dead man walking tends to freeze a room. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. A glass slipped from a woman's hand and shattered on the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Matteo Moretti stood up slowly, his face draining of color until he looked like a ghost. "Dante," he whispered, "that's impossible. You're dead." "Disappointed?" Dante sneered. He took a step forward, fighting the pain that threatened to buckle his knees. "You missed a spot, brother. Next time you want to kill the king, make sure you don't send a clown to do it." Luca Vancetti dropped Sarah's wrist as if it were burning hot. He reached for the gun under his coat. "Don't!" a voice roared from the VIP booth. Frankie the Walrus Russo had returned from the bathroom. In his hands, he held 2 submachine guns he had pulled from the hidden cache behind the bar. He leveled them at Luca and Matteo. "Nobody moves," Frank shouted. "Anyone touches the Don, I turn this booth into a slaughterhouse." The security guards, Moretti men, looked between Matteo and Dante. They were confused. They had been told Dante was dead. "He's a traitor," Matteo screamed, pointing at Dante. "He sold us out. Kill him." "Liar," Dante shouted back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a flash drive, the backup he had grabbed from the warehouse. He threw it over the balcony. It clattered onto the dance floor. "That drive contains the recordings," Dante yelled to his men. "Recordings of Matteo selling our roots to the Vancettis. He agreed to give them the south side if they killed me. He betrayed the family. He betrayed you." The guards hesitated. In the Mafia, betrayal was the only unforgivable sin. Luca Vancetti realized the tide was turning. He wasn't a man who waited for permission. He drew his gun and fired at Dante. Bang! The bullet shattered the plaster next to Dante's head. Chaos erupted. Screams filled the air as patrons dove for the floor. Frank opened fire, the submachine guns roaring as he sprayed the table, forcing Luca and Matteo to dive for cover. "Sarah, get down!" Dante screamed. Sarah didn't need to be told twice. She scrambled under a heavy oak table near the VIP rail. Above her, glass shattered and wood splintered as bullets flew back and forth. Dante moved. Pain was forgotten. He vaulted over the railing, landing on the VIP platform. He wasn't fighting for territory anymore. He was fighting for survival. He saw Luca pop up, aiming at Frank. Dante fired 2 shots. One hit Luca in the shoulder, spinning him around. The Vancetti boss fell back, groaning. Matteo scrambled toward the back exit, trying to flee like a rat. "Matteo!" Dante roared. He chased his brother into the kitchen corridor. Sarah, seeing Dante run into the back alone and injured, made a split-second decision. She crawled out from under the table. "Frank!" she yelled at the older man who was reloading. "Watch the room!" Then she ran after Dante. She burst into the kitchen just in time to see the brothers. Matteo had cornered Dante near the industrial freezers. Dante had collapsed, his wound finally giving out. His gun had skittered across the floor, out of reach. Matteo stood over him, a snub-nose revolver in his hand. He was crying and laughing at the same time. "I always hated you," Matteo spat. "You were always the favorite, the perfect son, the king. Well, look at you now, bleeding on the floor like a dog." Dante looked up, his vision blurring. Do it, Matteo. But know that you'll never be the Don. You're weak. Goodbye, brother. Matteo pulled back the hammer. Clang. A heavy cast-iron skillet slammed into the side of Matteo's head with a sickening crunch. Matteo's eyes rolled back in his head. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious before he hit the tiles. Standing behind him, breathing hard, was Sarah Jenkins. She held the frying pan with both hands like a baseball bat. Dante stared at her. He started to laugh, a wheezing, painful sound. Did you just knock out a Mafia capo with a frying pan? Sarah dropped the pan, her hands shaking. I'm a waitress, Dante. I know my way around a kitchen. She rushed to his side, falling to her knees. Are you okay? You're bleeding through the stitches. I'm fine, Dante groaned, leaning his head back against the freezer door. I'm great. Better than great. The kitchen doors burst open. Frank rushed in, followed by a dozen loyal Moretti soldiers. They saw Matteo unconscious on the floor and Dante sitting up, supported by Sarah. Frank looked at the frying pan, then at Sarah. A massive grin split his face. Boss, Frank said, nodding at Dante. The room is secured. Luca is in custody. The boys are waiting for your orders. Dante took Sarah's hand. He squeezed it tight. He used her leverage to pull himself to his feet. He swayed, but he stood tall. Take my brother to the basement, Dante ordered, his voice cold again. And get the car. The lady needs a ride home. 1 year later, the bell above the door of the Golden Spoon diner chimed, but Sarah wasn't behind the counter. In fact, she wasn't anywhere near a diner. She was sitting on the terrace of a villa in Lake Como, Italy. The sun was setting over the water, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold. She took a sip of her wine, enjoying the silence. It had been a long year. The war in Chicago had ended swiftly after that night at the Sapphire Club. With Matteo out of the picture and the Vanchettis crushed, Dante had consolidated power faster than anyone expected. But he had kept his promise. He hadn't just paid her mum's medical bills. He had flown the best specialists in the world to Chicago. Her mum was in remission now, living in a beautiful condo on the North Shore, fully paid for. As for Sarah, well, she had tried to go back to her old life. She really had. But after saving a king, serving coffee just didn't have the same thrill. A shadow fell over her. She looked up to see Dante. He looked different now, healthier, happier. The dark circles were gone. The scar on his side was the only reminder of the night they met. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Dinner is served, Mia Regina. Sarah smiled. She reached up and touched the ring on his finger. The silver lion. You know, she teased, I was thinking about opening a restaurant here. Maybe an American diner. Dante laughed, leaning down to kiss her forehead. You can open whatever you want, Sarah. You own the world now. He sat down beside her, looking out at the water. I never asked you, he said quietly. That night in the alley. Why did you really open the door? Sarah thought about it. She thought about the rain, the fear, and the desperation in his eyes that matched her own. Because, she said, taking his hand, I think I was waiting for something to happen. I was waiting to be hunted, so I could find out that I was actually the hunter. Dante smiled, raising his glass. To the hunter in the Honda Civic. To the king in the cargo pants, she replied. They clinked glasses. The Mafia boss and the waitress. A match made in hell, living in heaven. And that is how Sarah Jenkins went from serving pancakes to ruling an empire. It proves that sometimes the biggest twists in life happen in the darkest alleyways. Dante thought he needed a soldier to save him, but he found something much stronger, a woman with nothing left to lose. What do you think? Would you have opened that car door for a stranger, or would you have driven away? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of danger, betrayal, and romance, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have a crazy Wild West drama coming up next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next
Over a year and a half ago, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get some nice scans of like the few bird paintings that I've done that I'm proud of or whatever. The blue jay was one of them. And so I wrong pandemic. Yeah, what pandemic are you thinking about? Yeah, I started I figured I'd paint. I showed it to some friends who streamed, and they were like, "Oh, you should paint on stream, 'cause these little guys are cute and good." And I said, "Oh, you can do that? What?" And that's how I started streaming. And so it's been about a year and a half of painting way more consistently, and truly, the growth. Like whenever anyone says, I can't paint, I'm not good, or I'm not creative, or whatever it might be." I'm like, just do it a bunch, and God, you'll get better. You'll get better. Trust me on that. I know, right? Good friends. Very, very grateful for them. How do you find acrylic markers? I own a hoo-hoo for coloring books. Never tried the acrylics. Oh my God, no, Sophie, you should do it. This is my point exactly, is like, try it out. Give it a, type into Sophie, just do it. Yeah. I didn't paint. You know, I had done little funny art things or whatever before the pandemic, before doing, you know, just starting it. But I just bought it as like I guess I'm really bored. And then just kind of enjoyed it and took to it, and God, just give it a try. Hi, Bercuse.